Good morning, friends and family, and welcome to another Spyder Tracks video. Today we're going to set sail for the western part of Lake Erie and finish up our lighthouse project. Our lighthouse project has spanned the time of 3 years and spanned the Spyder equipment of 2 Spyders. And today I believe we're going to get her done. We're going to head south and go below Cleveland this time to the Port Clinton Sandusky area. We're going to see the Huron Lighthouse, the Marblehead Lighthouse, and the Port Clinton Lighthouse, spend the night. And then we're going to stop in at the Aviation Museum on the way back.
Power on. Connected.
And see what's new over there. And we'll be back tomorrow. So we're going to get packed up, layered up, get this thing warmed up and get out of here. Hope you enjoy the videos.
Connected. GR highway is closed. Switching to a drive to highlighted route.
Yeah. All we gotta do is wait for my lovely bride. Well, I thought we'd pull out the old map here and show you what we were doing. Because this was during a weekday, kind of wanted to stay clear of having to travel through downtown Cleveland on the interstate, so we took a southern route. And it took about 3 hours to get there, but it was nice, calm farmland and lots of cornfields, lots of soybean fields. We were going to spend the night out at the west end anyway at Port Clinton, so we really weren't in any hurry. And not a whole lot of things to see or videos to take on the way out there, and it was all good roads, so thought you'd be interested in where we were. Well, because of the wind noise, the audio for the next couple of clips is just unbearable to listen to, so you can look around at Huron Harbor and the river and what the scenic beauty of the area is, and we'll be back in a few minutes. So now we can get a good view of the walkway going out to the observation area and the piers that jut out to form the harbor entrance. And this is about the time when I put the video together. I'll give you some more history of the Huron Lighthouse. Just spend some time talking about that as we walk out here. And that we will. So the mouth of the Huron River here in Huron, exiting onto Lake Erie, was one of the first ports in Ohio to be settled. As early as 1749, a French trading post operated from this port, but it did not survive the Revolutionary War. Later on, as commerce increased in Huron, so did the need for a navigation aid at the port. So the first Huron Lighthouse was built in 1835 here on the West Pier. A dwelling was also built for the keeper, but it was later washed away along with about half of the lot on which it stood. The lighthouse was a pyramid-shaped tower constructed of wood. Wood, what could go wrong? And it was not durable enough to withstand the wind and weather of Lake Erie either, and so it too met its unfortunate end during a fierce storm in May of 1854. A new light was built 3 years later, and this time it was constructed of iron, as were the similar towers in Erie, Pennsylvania and Lorain, Ohio. The bottom portion of Huron Harbor's tower was open. It was a 27-foot tall tower, and the bottom was open, exposing the circular stairway to the top. At the top was the watchroom and the lantern room, and the light was equipped with a 4th order Fresnel lens. They also built an elevated walkway out to the tower so that the keeper could access the tower when the waves swept over the pier. It wasn't until March of 1871 that Congress finally appropriated the necessary funds to build a keeper's house. And after many delays, it was finally finished, and the keeper was able to move in February of 1873. Then in 1900, the lower portion of the tower was covered with sheathing and metal shingles and painted white below the lantern room. According to an 1878 light list, that open tower, previous version of the tower, had previously been painted black on its lower part and red on its upper portion. An oil house was also erected adjacent to the tower in 1903. So then in 1908, the Lighthouse Board noted that Huron was rapidly becoming a harbor of importance, and they wanted to upgrade the lighting and upgrade the pier. So they requested from Congress $3,800 to relocate the pierhead tower to the outer end of the West Pier extension once the West Pier extension was completed. Congress finally responded to the request in 1917. So make the request in 1908, get the money in 1917. And they appropriated around $4,500 for the project. They also included another navigation aid called a range light system, sometimes called a leading light system. And the idea for that is there's a second light further upriver around a bend in the river, and that color was red. And the idea is that for a captain to know that he was on the right heading coming into the harbor, he would line up the lighthouse, the front light, and the red light, which was the rear light, in a vertical alignment straight up and down, and that would tell him that he was on the right heading. If the rear light was to the right of the front light, that meant he was too far right and had to steer left, and vice versa. And so in 1928, the intensity of the front light, also the lighthouse, was increased through the introduction of electricity to the lamp, and the original fog bell was replaced by an air diaphone fog horn that sounded a group of 2 blasts every 30 seconds. So they began a project in 1934 to extend the west pier another 1,200 feet out into the lake and remove 300 feet from the east breakwater in order to widen the entrance to the harbor and create a larger turning basin at the mouth of the Huron River. This work was completed the following year, and it was then decided that they needed to upgrade the lighthouse to the current lighthouse that you see now. Now this style of lighthouse they refer to as an Art Deco lighthouse, and that was built by the same firm that built the lighthouse in Conneaut, which is essentially a twin to this. It's a 72-foot high tower, and at the bottom, at the bigger part, is the fog signal building. As you can see, originally it had a lantern room at the top, and it was lit by commercial electric power, which was supplied by an underwater cable out to the lighthouse. The lighthouse was controlled from shore, and there was a standby electric generator in the event of commercial power failure. And so in 1972, the lantern room at the top of the lighthouse was removed, and a modern beacon consisting of a solar power lens was installed, and that's the light that's still in use today. It can be seen over a 12-mile radius, and it flashes a red light with a characteristic of 3 seconds on, followed by 3 seconds off. In 2015, the lighthouse was completely solarized, and the cable that carried commercial power out to the lighthouse was removed. And that's where we are today.
So I know we're going to get a lot of wind noise, so I try to do something else so you don't have to listen to it. And you can be able to see those people out there.
And parked beside us when we come back, excuse me, is a 1949 Jeepster. Talked to the owner. Still has the original 4-cylinder engine in it. fold up the passenger front seat so the people can get into the back. Alrighty then, back on the bike we go. Get out on Route 2 and cross over the bridge of Sandusky Bay and headed out to the Marblehead Lighthouse. Sits in a beautiful state park. About a 45 minute ride, and the only problem we had was that we ran into some fresh paving, which gave me something to do when I got back home, to pick out all these little sticky black stones that had fallen, got stuck up underneath the bike. Once again, the wind noise was pretty bad, so we'll just talk about the history of the lighthouse here. The Marblehead Lighthouse is the oldest continuous operating lighthouse on the Great Lakes. It has been featured on U.S. postage stamps, has appeared on Ohio license plates, and it's now part of the Ohio State Park system, which you'll be seeing as we go. The history of the lighthouse began in 1819, when U.S. Congress allocated $5,000 for the construction of a light tower on the Marblehead Peninsula to guide vessels into Sandusky Bay, and to help them safely transit the treacherous southern passage that runs between the Ohio mainland and a cluster of offshore islands, namely Kelly's Island and South Bass Island. William Kelly was the name of a guy, and he had a crew of himself and 2 men, and they began construction of the tower in September 1821 on this little outcropping of limestone on the northern tip of the peninsula. And by November, the shoreline was home to a 50-foot tower with wooden ladders leaning up to its lantern room. The base of the tower was 26 feet in diameter, and the walls were 5 feet thick. And the top measured 12 feet in diameter, and the walls were 2 feet thick. The tower was constructed of limestone, and it was all quarried nearby here on the peninsula. And so the Marblehead Lighthouse cost $7,232 to build, and was the only navigational aid in the Sandusky Bay area for many years. In fact, the tower was called the Sandusky Bay Lighthouse until 1870. Its first beacon consisted of 13 small whale oil lamps with round wicks set in 16-inch reflectors. Benajah Walcott was Marblehead's first keeper. He was a Revolutionary War veteran, one of the first settlers in the area, and he had purchased 114 acres in 1809 and built a log cabin for himself and his family. He was appointed keeper in June of 1822, and thus had use of the stone dwelling built adjacent to the lighthouse as his keeper's house. But he also had William Kelly construct a small limestone home on his homestead in the Sandusky side of the peninsula, and his personal dwelling is the oldest residence still standing in Ottawa County. And each evening during the shipping season, and the lake does freeze over most winters, so he didn't have to do this all year round, Keeper Walcott would climb the lighthouse to light the 13 lamps, and then faithfully tend the light until the following morning. In addition to minding the lake, Walcott also kept a record of ships that passed by, noted the weather conditions, and organized any rescue efforts for ships that were in distress. The Keeper Walcott served for 10 years as the lighthouse keeper, then he passed away due to cholera in 1832. Upon his death, his wife Rachel took over his duties, and that made her the first female lighthouse keeper on the Great Lakes ever. After keeping the light for 2 years, Rachel remarried, and her new husband became the light's third keeper. Lodowick Brown served as keeper of the lighthouse from 1849 to 1853. Interestingly, his wife, Margaret Kelly Brown, was the daughter of William Kelly, the same William Kelly who constructed the lighthouse. A second female keeper, Mrs. Joanne McGee, served at the lighthouse from 1896 to 1903 after her husband, keeper George McGee, died. Charles Hunter had the longest tenure as head keeper, serving from 1903 to 1933. In 1858, Marblehead's whale oil lamps were replaced by a lard oil lantern, magnified by a fourth-order Fresnel lens. A life-saving station was constructed 1/2 mile west of the lighthouse in 1876, and Lucien Clemens was named its first commander. Clemens had proven his bravery the year before when he and his two brothers saved two sailors after their shipwrecked off the peninsula. Now in 1877, the Lighthouse Board recommended that $20,000 be provided for rebuilding the light station. The keeper's dwelling was described as old, leaky, and barely habitable, and the tower was in bad condition. By the following year, the dwelling was not habitable in cold weather and was unfit for use at a dwelling at any time. The keeper and his family were forced to seek shelter in a small one-room shed during cold weather. The funds allowed the current keeper's dwelling to be constructed in 1880, and the exterior of the limestone tower to be covered with stucco and painted white. However, the Lighthouse Board continued to insist that a new tower was needed. The keeper's dwelling had 7 rooms and a cellar and served as housing for the head keeper and an assistant. The assistant's position was created in 1903. But rather than build a new tower, the top 8 feet of the limestone tower were removed in 1897, and a cylindrical brick extension which housed the watchroom and closets was added to the top of the tower. A brick cylinder was also constructed within the 65-foot tower to hold the new spiral cast iron stairway, got rid of the wooden one, and to support a larger lantern and parapet. And that was taken from a discontinued Erie land lighthouse, and that was placed atop the tower in 1900. 4 windows were also added to the tower in 1897. So at the completion of all renovations, the total height of the tower was extended by 15 feet. A clockwork system, powered by weights that descended inside a large pipe in the center of the tower, was later installed to precisely rotate a new 3.5 order Fresnel lens that went into service at the opening of navigation in 1903. The keeper would crank up the weights about every 4 hours, and as the weights descended, the clockwork mechanism would cause the new lens to revolve, producing a white flash every 10 seconds. This style of lens was officially called a bivalve lens, was also referred to as a double bullseye lens. This Marblehead lens is 5 feet in diameter, has 128 prisms, is described as being flawless, and weighs about 300 pounds. With that lamp, the lens produced 330,000 candle power of light. The lamp inside burned kerosene, and in 1891 a circular metal oil house had been erected between the tower and the dwelling to contain the kerosene. A square iron oil house capable of holding 450 gallons was added to the station in 1905. Neither one of these oil houses are at the station today. And in 1923, an electric light replaced the incandescent oil vapor lamp, increasing the intensity of the light to 600,000 candle power. So Marblehead's last civilian keeper, named Edward Herman, resigned in 1943 after 10 years of service. The Coast Guard then assumed responsibility for the lighthouse, which was then automated and given a fresh coat of stucco in 1958. So major renovation work was performed in 1969. The tower's exterior received a facelift, and the interior saw a change in its beacon, and a 300mm beacon replaced the Fresnel lens. With the new 15-pound beacon in place, the tower flashed a green light every 6 seconds. Green helped distinguish it from the white lights of the surrounding city. Upon removal, the Fresnel lens was shipped to Detroit, Michigan, where it was slated for demolition. After heavy petitioning by local folks, the Historical Society, and various local government officials, the Coast Guard relented and donated the lens back to the town the following year. A condition was that the townspeople had to go to Detroit and go get it, which they did. It was placed on display in the town hall, and in early 1980s, the lens was relocated to the Marblehead Coast Guard Station. It was moved to the restored Keeper's Dwelling at the museum in 2004. The original fourth order lens was also saved and is on display at the Coast Guard Station. In January 1997, Marblehead's lighthouse tower and a small plot of land surrounding it was declared surplus federal property by the Coast Guard, and ultimately the Ohio Department of Natural Resources was able to take ownership of that part plus the surrounding park, and now they own and maintain the entire park area. Now, the life-saving station here at the park is a recreation of the original life-saving station here in Marblehead. And as we all know that the United States Life-Saving Service was a precursor to the United States Coast Guard. Between Memorial Day and Labor Day, it is also available for tours. The best we could do was kind of peek in the windows, but I found some pictures online that show you what they have inside. Now, the Marblehead Lighthouse Historical Society has a great web page, and they have a webcam that operates 24/7, 365. So anytime you wanted to see the lighthouse live on the internet, you could just go to the link. I will provide a link in the description underneath this video on YouTube, as long as I can get it to work right. So we'll end this video here. We're still staying in Port Clinton for the night. We're going to see Port Clinton Lighthouse. In the next video, we'll talk about the South Bass Island Lighthouse, and we'll see you in the next video.